Imagine, if you will, a set. A set containing cards carefully selected from Magic's history, some that have had a profound impact on formats, while others, not so much. Cards that never even made it beyond R&D. What kind of set would it be? How would you draft it? What would you even call it? It is and forever will be a mystery. So, hello and welcome to another unboxing. This time, we're doing the Mystery Booster. And you need to be careful because there's the regular Mystery Booster and then there's the one that we have here, which says Convention Edition. So Mystery Boosters were essentially designed for what's known as a Chaos Draft, which typically means that it's a draft. It's treated the same way as if it was a regular draft, in which case everyone gets about 3 packs and then starts passing it left, right, then left. But the difference between a regular draft and a Chaos Draft is that in a Chaos Draft, everyone gets random boosters from basically anywhere. So, well, not anywhere, from any printed Magic set. So, for example, if you attend a Chaos Draft, you could get a booster pack from Innistrad, a booster pack from Midnight Hunt, and a booster pack from, say, Mirrodin. So you'd have those 3 packs, and the person sitting next to you might have a pack from Gatecrash, another pack from Ikoria, and another pack from 5th edition, or something like that. So everyone has different packs. Some may double up, as in you may have a pack from Midnight Hunt and another one has a pack from Midnight Hunt. But the idea is that you crack the packs, you draft what you want, and then you pass it left, right. So it's completely chaotic. So there's no way that you can formulate a plan, because usually when you go to a draft, you know what cards are going to be in the set, and you have a good idea of which cards are good in a draft and which cards aren't. With a Chaos Draft, no one knows. So what Wizards did is they made the Mystery Booster, which is basically a single 15-card booster pack, which contains cards from a curated list of about 1,600 Magic cards, which they call the list. And usually when you buy a set booster, you can have a chance of getting an additional rare from the set, or a special one, like in Strixhaven set boosters, they had the chance of getting one of the archive cards, or you have a chance of getting a card from the set. From the list. So the Mystery Booster has basically only cards from the list, and usually has a few other surprises. So let's get to cracking. So as you see here, standard booster. Oh, I should mention that that I have here is the Convention Edition, and the Convention Edition is different to the regular Mystery Booster, in that for the Convention Edition, we have, as the last card, an R&D card. Now, these R&D cards, I'm just going to have different art, and are basically test cards. So these are cards that are never going to see the light of day, and a lot of them are kind of funny. Like here we have Tybalt the Chaotic, which legendary Planeswalker Tybalt comes into play with 4 loyalty, and it costs 1 of anything and 2 red. And its +1 is cast a copy of the following cards chosen at random: Ignorant Bliss, Crack the Earth, Blazing Volley. For its -3, cast a copy of the following cards chosen at random: Seething Song, Dance with Devil's Flame Break. And its ulti, which is -6, cast a copy of the following cards chosen at random: Hellion Eruption, Insurrection, Warp World. And all of those are actually pretty decent cards. The reason why it's probably a test is because random doesn't always work well in Magic. Like for Magic Arena, they're in the latest Jumpstart, which was the Magic Arena, which had a few Magic Arena exclusive cards. The random does work because you can insert a random generator and it produces that. Random in physical games of Magic tends to be a bit harder to do. Yes, you can randomize it, but honestly, there's always at least some form of bias. Particularly if you don't have those particular cards, it can be really annoying because you have to randomly pick those cards and then you got to bring it up on Gather or Scryfall or something like that. Also, the most important part, is that down the bottom here, down the bottom, can't really quite see it, but there's a little line of text just there that says it's a test card and not for constructed play, which basically means it's like you treat it like it's a silver bordered card. So basically, if anything that says you're allowed non-legal cards or non-standard cards for play, you can usually sort of play that. But that's our first R&D card, which is Tybalt the Chaotic. Going back to the rest of the pack, you can see that we have the same number of commons, uncommons. Actually, sometimes it leans a bit heavier towards commons or uncommons. It's a bit weird. That's part of the chaotic nature. But I'm probably not going to go through every single card. Maybe just focus on the uncommons and the rares, because a lot of the commons that you get in this set are pretty common, but also you got random things like this one here is from, I'm pretty sure it's one of the Amonkhet Jewel decks. Oh wait, no, that's from War of the Spark. So you got War of the Spark, then you got one from Iconic Masters, you got one from Rivals of Ixalan, you got an uncommon from Dragons of Tikir, and then you've got another common from Rivals of Ixalan, a common from Dominaria, a common from, I believe that is a dual deck. I don't quite know what the dual deck is. I think it's Goblins versus something. And then you've got another common, which is from Guilds of Ravnica, a common from Dominaria, a common from, I want to say it's Modern Masters 2017, an uncommon from Kaladesh, a common from a Commander set. I honestly can't remember all the Commander set icons. I just generally can identify if it's the Commander set or not. An uncommon from Zendikar, like the first Zendikar. And the rare from Night Howler, which was first introduced in the Theros one. Not Theros, it was in Born of the Gods, I want to say, because that had Bestow. And this rare, and that was its first printing. This rare, however, is from a Commander deck. I can never remember what again, I can't remember the Commander deck icons, but it's the one with Melaran. So that's what I mean. I mean, I'll probably go through the rares and the uncommons, and usually I'd go through all the rares, the uncommons, and the commons, and then offer insight. But with the randomness of it all, what I'll do is I'll just go through the uncommons and the rares, and maybe talk about any commons that I come across that are significant in some way. or at least ones that I'm going to stick in my decks. So, just going through. So again, as you saw, you can have commons and then you'll have an uncommon. This time it's Breeding Pit, which is kind of good. I mean, it produces a 0/1 black thrall, but you have to pay the upkeep of 2 black. It's okay for commander, but it's pretty limited in which commander you'd use it in. And then, so it goes commons, uncommon, and then it'll go back to commons again, just to screw with you. Mercurial Geists, I don't particularly like. Yes, it's a spirit, but it's blue-red, and spirits, particularly since it's from the Eldritch Moon set, which means it's in Innistrad, and Innistrad tend to be blue-white ghosts. It's a bit meh. We have Meteorite, which actually isn't too bad. It's just expensive because it's 5 to get a mana rock. Yes, it produces any color, but it also and deals 2 damage, but it's still 5. It's a bit expensive at this point in time. Hey, Revel in Riches! Huzzah! That's actually not a bad card. It's whenever a creature dies, whenever a creature and an opponent dies, you create a treasure artifact, and then if you have 10 or more, you win the game. It's a nice little clock in Commander, because then you just wipe the board and then you go, ha 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 ha. So, how many treasures do I create? And the R&D card we have is Animate Spell. So, a lot of the fun comes from the really wacky art. Like, it's simplistic in some instances, like in Animate Spell, or it's like detailed, as with Tybalt. But so we have Animate Spell. It's an enchantment aura with flash, and it costs 1 blue. Okay. Enchant instant or sorcery spell on the stack. Okay. When Animate Spell becomes attached to an instant or sorcery, put that card into the battlefield under its owner's control. It's a creature in addition to its other types with power and toughness each equal to the converted mana cost. When Animate Spell leaves the battlefield, enchanted card's owner sacrifices it unless they cast it. Say what now? Sorry, I gotta try and wrap my head around this one. So, you cast... you cast Cancel. And then you flash in Animate Spell, targeting your Cancel. The Cancel should resolve, but instead of going to the bin, it goes to the field as a 3/3. And then, when Animate leaves the battlefield, enchanted card's owner sacrifices it. Yeah, unless they cast it. See, that's the thing that gets me, because it sounds to me like then when somehow Animate Spell dies, or someone board wipes, it then sounds to me like Animate Spell drops off, and then you have the option of like recasting the spell that you just animated, which means you get your Cancel to... Now I know why it was a test card. Because that's confusing. That would lead to all kinds of really bad, wacky, and stupid interactions. I mean, they might find a way to make it work. I mean, that's part of the test cards. But I don't think that that's going to be a good one. So our next pack, we have Path to Exile, which is an uncommon, and that pretty much goes in any white deck ever. So I don't even need to explain it. Then we have some more commons. I think this one's just going to be mainly common. Oh no, we have a Tower Gargoyle, which is 4-drop 4/4 with flying and an uncommon. Hooray for Esper. I mean, it doesn't really do much. Pathrazer of Ulamog. It's an Eldrazi. I love Eldrazi, but Pathrazor is nice, but it's an 11 for a 9/9. I'd rather use Artisan of Kozilek, because that gets stuff back. Pathrazor is just like, it can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures, so it's like a menace with an additional thing. And we have our first mythic. So yes, you can get mythics in mystery boosters. Actually, I really do like mystery boosters because it gives you such a range to even cards that you never had before. So I strongly recommend that if you've only started playing Magic in the past, like, 2-3 years, mystery boosters are a great thing to pick up because it contains a plethora of half-decent cards from all the way across. Like, we have Commander, Shards of Alara, just, it's a good pickup. So here we have Anima, which I always thought was a decent commander, but it's just the fact that no one really plays Anima. I mean, sure, when Anima was first came out with the first commander sets, like with the Mimeoplasm and all that, Anima was pretty popular, but then it sort of got sidelines. But Anima's great. Like, it's a 3-drop with protection from white and black, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then creature spells you cast cost 1 less for each +1/+1 counter on it. So you just basically make your creatures really cheap. And you keep casting them, and Anima keeps getting bigger. I suppose the problem is that it builds itself more towards a Voltron deck, which is a name from the Japanese anime Voltron, but it basically means that you have your commander, and then you just keep piling things on that one commander. So a good Voltron is Skullbriar, Braids, and a few others. So Anima leads itself more towards a sort of Voltron build, but it can be good for basically being a wide Voltron, because you just need to protect him, and then you just keep playing a whole bunch of creatures, and he gets bigger, which basically means that it swings. And for our test card, we have Transcantation, which is a 1 red instant. Target instant or sorcery spell becomes a copy of Lightning Bolt. Its controller may choose new targets for it. What? Why? Why? I mean, yes, you can turn a cancel into a Lightning Bolt or a board wipe into a Lightning Bolt, but why Lightning Bolt? I mean, why? This is by no means a bad card. It's just a card that makes me go, why? Why Lightning Bolt? I mean, I suppose the answer is why not Lightning Bolt, but I like the idea of taking someone's spell and turning it into something else, but okay. That's... it hasn't quite broken me, but it's coming close, because that's... why? So, moving on to the next pack, because I can't get over Transcantation. We have more commons. Oh, we have Sleep. Sleep's a nice tap-down card. It does its job. Ooh, a Sengir Vampire. Severely underrated, unless you're running vampires. But flying, and whenever a creature is dealt damage by Sengir Vampire, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. The biggest problem is that it costs 5 for a 4/4 with flying, but the other ability makes up for it. Thrill of Possibility, even though that's not the first printing, because typically the way that mystery boosters work is they'll take the latest printing of the card, just because it's easier, which is why the Night Howler is from the Commander deck and not from Theros. There's a Shock. And... oh! Call of the Nightwing. Okay. I really, 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 really love Call of the Nightwing. I think it's a great card. So it's create a 1/1 blue-black horror creature token with flying, which is fantastic because anything with flying is great. Also, I like the subtype horror. But it's also got Cipher, which means that when you cast it, you then can quote-unquote encode it onto a creature, which means that whenever the creature deals combat damage to a player, that spell gets cast again. So basically, you play it, you get a 1/1 blue-black horror creature token with flying. You encode it onto your biggest creature. Then your biggest creature, which has trample or something, then deals combat damage to an opponent, and you get a new 1/1, and then you keep smacking, and you go hundreds of 1/1s, which I think is really great. The problem is that I think it was because it was too expensive, or something, and I don't think that the Cipher ability was particularly popular, because it was just a matter of you encode it onto a creature, and then your opponent's either just going to outright kill that creature, or just chump block it. Unless they have, unblockable or trample or something. So I think it's kind of sad, because I really like the card, even though others didn't. Ooh! Whisper Silk Cloak. So Whisper Silk Cloak is a great commander card. It's usually followed by, so you have Lightning Greaves, which gives you haste and shroud, and then you have the other boots, whose name temporarily escapes me, which gives you hexproof and haste. And then of course the other one is Whisper Silk Cloak, which gives you which makes you unblockable, and shroud. And shroud means that it can't be the target of any spells or abilities. That's both you and your opponent. Hexproof means that means that you can cast spells on your creature, but your opponent can't. I mean, I probably don't need to explain hexproof, just the shroud. And unblockable in Commander is always a good card, and shroud is also good. Hey, Corrupted Conscience! Corrupted Conscience is great, particularly if you're building a blue Infect deck, or an Infect deck with blue, because Infect is amazing. Corrupted Conscience is basically enchant target creature, you gain control of target creature, it now has Infect. It's great. It's just, unless you're building an Infect deck, it's really not going to hold any water. Oh, we have a Mythic. Oh, so this Mythic is from not Take the Crown. From the set with Monarch. I am not doing too well today. But it's from the draft set. So there was a set that was created specifically for draft. Conspiracy. And it actually was really fun to draft. Because what happens is that you'd have normal cards that you could use in Commander and things like that. Like this one here, Selvala. But it also had a number of conspiracies, which were draft-only cards. And what you would do is you could draft those cards, and you draft it face down in a separate pile. So when you made your deck, you could then put those cards in a different deck and do what they needed to be done. And then during the game, what would happen is someone would do something which would then trigger one of your conspiracy cards, and you'd reveal it, and then you'd get a bonus. It's pretty difficult to explain, but really, really fun. I'm kind of sad that we haven't seen any of the conspiracy sets for a little while, but with the fact that what's been going on in the world recently, it makes sense. But anyway, so we have Selvala, Heart of the Wilds, which is a 1, 2 green, legendary creature, Elf Scout. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. Unfortunately, it goes for for all players, but it's still kind of nice. Because then its second ability is, for a green and tapping, you add X mana in any combination of colours to your mana pool, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So she basically becomes a sweet mana dork. And our test card is Planequake. Ooh. It's an X and a red sorcery. Planequake deals X damage to each creature without flying and each planeswalker. If X is 10 or more, open the Uncovered Cavern plot booster. Okay. This sounds like it was supposed to be one of the cards for the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set. Because that also deals with planes, not just magic. It also has Uncovered Cavern plot booster. I can see why it was probably shelved. Like it's pretty similar to the cards that we got in Zendikar, which is you can do this thing and pay X, or you pay X and you do this thing and you deal that much damage, or you get that many creatures back, and if X is 10 or more, then you get this other thing. But the Uncovered Cavern plot booster, so the idea of plot boosters was probably for Adventures in the Forgotten Realm. I mean, every so often, Rosewater or Forsyth tries to go back to having like having a side deck or another way of getting the cards to interact with players, which I always think is nice. It doesn't always work out for them. Like energy, I really liked the energy thing that they brought in Kaladesh. Like, for energy, you basically had a separate pool of mana, which was energy, and you would pay mana and you'd cast creatures, but then of course you had the ability to pay an additional cost in energy, and you would get a different bonus. And there would be cards that generate energy, and a lot of cards that sucked energy. On paper, it sounds really bad, but once you started playing, it was so much fun. I really enjoyed that. And then the most recent one has been the dungeoning, or the dungeons, where whenever you venture into the dungeon, you can choose one of 3 dungeons to enter in, or if you're already in a dungeon, then you move to the next room. That's not bad, and it's kind of fun. But the original plan, according to, I think it was Mark Rosewater, was that it was going to be a separate deck that you would create of about 10 or 5 cards, and then each time you ventured into a dungeon, you'd reveal the top card. The only problem was that it produced too much random, so people couldn't plan their decks accordingly, which is why they didn't go with it. But I think that's a great option, because they're always coming out with different ways of getting players to interact or interesting new things to try. So, once more, we have our commons. And a lot of commons. Mainly commons. Hey, Mortify. Mortify's a great card. Destroy target creature or enchantment. Boom. Cost 3. It's like Anguished Unmaking, but not as good. But still, definitely a decent one. Burnished Heart. Burnished Heart is an interesting one, because it's one that you should put in your commander deck, because it's colourless and it fetches 2 basic lands, and it puts them onto the battlefield tapped. But it's one of those ones where it's like, it depends on whether or not you're okay with a mana fetcher taking up a slot. So you have things like Sakura Tribe Elder, which does kind of the same thing, but it's just a matter of whether or not you want to do it. I have it in, I think it's about a third of my decks. Usually I stick it in the decks that have 3 or more colours, just because it makes it easier to fetch those basic lands. And we have Krufix, the God of Horizons, which was an okay card. They made, like, story-wise for Theros, they made Krufix out to be the God of Mysteries, and he had all this, well, it technically had all this knowledge about what was happening and why things were going on, and they built him up, and then they just sort of whiffed him because he basically did the standard thing of, I know more than I'm telling, and I'm not telling. And then they printed him as a card in the set that they sort of revealed him. And yeah, like indestructible as long as your devotion to green and blue is less than 7. Krufix isn't a creature. That's standard for the Theros gods. For the monocolored gods, it's 5. But for the dual-colored gods, it's 7, so standard. You have no maximum hand size. Cool. If unused mana would empty from your mana pool, that mana becomes colourless instead. Cool. It's like an alternate coloured version of Omnath. Yay. The thing is, it's the kind of card that you'd have in a blue-green deck, but not the kind of card that you'd have as the actual commander. Ooh, and we have an additional rare, Sword of Animist. I like this card. It's not in any of my decks, but I still like it because it costs 2 to equip, and the creature gets 1/1, and whenever it attacks, you search your library for a basic land, and it enters the battlefield tapped. It gets you lands. It's decent. It's just there's usually better cards that I want to put in. Like, unless I've got a commander or mainly a deck that focuses on landfall triggers, it doesn't really have much. Or have a deck that's got that needs a whole bunch of lands on the field. I just don't like. There are other cards. Usually the filtering cards. And our test card is the Mirrored Lotus, which it costs 0 because it's a Lotus. Or a Mox. Moxes or Lotuses typically... Well, actually, Moxes typically have 0. Lotuses can range from having 0 to actually having costs, like Gilded Lotus costs 5. But it's an artifact with Reflect 0. So as this card enters the battlefield, each opponent may pay the Reflect cost. When they do, they create a token copy of this, except it lacks this ability. Which, honestly, I think is actually a really good idea. Because it stops cards from being incredibly broken. Because it means that you can have more powerful cards, and whether or not you want to cast them is up to you as to whether you get more value out of it, or whether your opponents will get more value out of it. I honestly think that's a really good ability. The only problem is that I can see that if they ever print a set which has Reflect like that, then it's going to be an ability that people won't like very much. Because people tend to like asymmetrical abilities, and that is cards or abilities that give them a bonus and don't really help the opponent. Even if you're building a group hug deck, which is a deck which is like, if you draw a card, everyone draws a card. If you play a creature, everyone plays a creature. Basically group hug. Then that's okay, but usually people want a sort of asymmetrical group hug. So, if a player draws a card, everyone draws a card. So that way it's not just if you draw a card. Or something along the lines of, at the beginning of your turn, each player draws a card and you draw an additional card. Which is like, you get 2 cards, everyone else gets 1. That's sort of asymmetrical. Anyway, its second ability is to tap to exile Mirrored Lotus and add 3 mana of any one colour, which is pretty much standard Gilded Lotus. Well, except for its sacrifice, not exile, but I like the reflect. Maybe if they made it reflect 1, so your opponents only net 2, only get a total net of 2 for it, or maybe maybe the reflect, when it reflects, it enters the battlefield tapped. Something like that. But honestly, I like that card. I can see it causing a large number of problems, but honestly, if they just tweak the reflect, I think Mirrored Lotus would actually make a half-decent card. Or even possibly a really good mythic. So then we have Everdream. Draw from Modern Horizons 1. Draw a card, splice into instant or sorcery for 3. Okay. It's a thing. I mean, splice into is not bad. It's fine. I got no real qualms about it. Oh, Duress. Duress is always a good card. It's been reprinted so many times, but that's because it's still a half-decent card. Slaver Bolus. I like this because Slaver Bolus is basically, what is it? Traitorous Instinct or anything like that, which is basically you gain control of target creature until end of turn. It gains haste. The only difference between that and Slaver Bolus, because they both usually cost about 5, is the fact that at the beginning of the next end step, you sacrifice that creature. Which is fun. Frontier Bivouac, which is just it's a 3-color mana, making up for the Citadels and others that were released at an earlier with shards. And wow, we're getting all the gods. So now we have Porphyros, God of the Forge. With its indestructible, as long as your devotion to red is less than 5 Porphyroses in a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Porphyros deals 2 damage to each opponent. And for 2 and a red, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. He's decent. His whole thing is basically that, for his, as a commander, his whole thing is basically you produce a whole bunch of tokens and you shoot things. It's fine. Next we have Mirror Entity, which is a changeling, and for X, until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness of XX, and gain all creature types. He's fine. I had him in my Sliver deck for a little while. Mirror Entity's not a bad card. And our test card is Recycler Bird. So, as you can see, it's a Recycler Bird. He is a bird creature for 1 blue and has flying. When Recycler Bird dies, put a flying counter on target creature you control. I don't know how to feel about this card. Like, it's not bad because it's a 1-drop 1/1 with flying, and there are a few of those, and they're all pretty good. The problem is the second ability, because I'm pretty sure that there is another card that already does that from Ikoria, because the whole flying counters or counters with abilities was an Ikoria thing. I'm hoping that it comes back because I like that. I like that idea of being able to give counters onto things that usually don't have them. But I'm pretty sure that Ikoria already had one that did that, except for it was like a 2 or a 3-drop. And it being a 1-drop 1/1 with flying and does that is probably the reason why it's a test card. I mean, it's pretty good because you can sacrifice it or throw it under the bus to give a big ass creature flying, but it's not particularly whelming or underwhelming, or it's one of those cards that you sort of look at and you go, yeah, that's a thing. Ooh, and our very first card right out of the pack is an uncommon, which is Gift of Estates, which was, if I recall, it was reprinted as one of the archive cards. If an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for up to 3 Plains cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. Pretty good early game. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but it's not bad. Treasure Mage! This was in one of the Masters sets. I mean, the icon here is from one of the dual decks, I want to say. Still not 100% sure on that icon. But I got so many Treasure Mages from one of the Masters sets that I am sick of it. It's a 3-drop 2/2. When Treasure Mage enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 6 or greater, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. Look, it does what it needs to do, but it's a card that doesn't need to be reprinted as often as it has been. That's my only issue. I mean, it just sort of feels like a card that's now like 10 cents when it should be like 50 cents or even $1 because it hasn't been reprinted that much. Because it works in a number of decks. It's just a card that really doesn't need to be reprinted as often as it has. Ooh! So our rare is Chancellor of the Annex, which was a set of Chancellors that were released with New Phyrexia. And all the Chancellors are actually pretty decent. Except one. There was one that wasn't that good. I want to say it was the red one. So Chancellor of the Annex costs 7. So that's 4 and 3 white. Or you may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, when each opponent casts his or her first spell for the game, counter that spell unless that player pays 1. It is flying, and whenever an opponent casts a spell, counter it unless that player pays 1. So each of the Chancellors had an ability that if this card was in your hand, in your opening hand, you could reveal it, and then something would happen. Like, players would each lose 2 life, or you could play an additional card, or the card would cost less. Something like that. And next we have Shamanic Revelation, which is 3, 2 green. Draw a card for each creature you control. Ferocious, which was an ability that was introduced in Dragons of Tekia. Wait. Was it Dragon? I can't remember, because you had Khans of Tekia, then you had... Oh no, it was Fate. Because there was only one really good card in Fate, and that was Ugin. And then you had Dragons of Tekia. Dragons of Tekia was the last one. But yeah. So from Fate... So this one's from Fate, which introduced Ferocious, which is basically if you have a creature with 4 or more power. And its Ferocious is you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Huzzah. And our test card is Experiment 5. I think this is supposed to be a play on Experiment 0. Creature, Bear Snake Mutant. It costs 1. It costs 1 green. And for 1 and a Z, put a +1/+2 counter on Experiment 5. Z is paid with 1 mana from any source that could produce 2 or more colours of mana. Okay. No, I don't like that. I mean, it gives it a +1/+2 counter, which already screws with how counters work. But basically, if you pay one and anything from something that could produce two different colors. So two or more colors of mana. So a signet, I suppose you could use a signet for it. Okay, that's... I don't like that. No, I don't. I do not like that. That is... No. That seems needlessly complicated for the sake of being needlessly complicated. Resurrection. Seeker of the Way is an uncommon. It's a 1 and a white prowess, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Seeker of the Way gains lifelink until end of turn. So basically it was a way of doing prowess with an additional thing. Seeker of the Way was actually quite popular because that's Khans of Takia, was quite popular when Khans was around. Ooh, Shriekmaw! My first encounter of Shriekmaw was actually part of the Mimeoplasm Commander deck, which was one of the first Commander decks released. And I liked it. It's just, because it has Fear, which means it can't be blocked by anything other than black or artifact creatures. And when it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. Cool. But it costs 4 and a black, which means it costs a total of 5 for a 3/2. Expensive. But the main reason you cast it is the fact that it has Evoke, which is basically you cast it for its Evoke cost. It comes into play and then it dies immediately. So basically you play it, it enters the battlefield, any enter the battlefield triggers effect happen, then you have to sacrifice it immediately, which means any sacrifice triggers then happen as well. But it's also a quick way of basically saying, oh, you've got that huge ass creature, I'm going to pay 2, evoke Shriekmaw, and that creature dies. Oh, we have Fallen Angel, again an uncommon. With flying, sacrifice a creature, Fallen Angel gets +2/+1 till end of turn. For 5, and it's a 3/3. Pyrotechnics. Wow, a lot of uncommons. Pyrotechnics deals 4 damage, divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or players. See, I can usually get behind effects like this, where it's like you have 4 damage and you can put 1 onto something, 3 onto something else, or you can split it 2/2, or you can just shoot something for 4, which includes players. I don't mind that. What gets me is the ones that say you deal 1 damage. You can split that damage as you choose between any number of players, and there are actually a couple of cards that do that. And it annoys me because it's like, okay, so I can deal 1 to that, or I can deal 1 to that. I get that it's supposed to be used with effects that increase it, so it's like 3 damage and then you can split it, but splitting always seems to be a bit of a comme ci comme ça. Roast. I do like Roast. And I also like the card Roast. So Roast is for 1 and a red, deal 5 damage to target creature without flying. That is it. That is its entire thing. It deals 5 damage for 2. Great. What's the caveat? You can't target anything with flying. Why do I care? Heck yeah, I'm going to roast stuff. I do like... Ooh, Thrashing Brontodon. It basically, you pay 1, you sacrifice Thrashing Brontodon, and it destroys target artifact or enchantment, which is pretty decent. On top of that, it's a 3-drop for a 3/4, which is actually really decent. River Hoopo. Okay. River Hoopo. It's a green blue bird with flying, and you pay 5 to gain 2 life and draw a card for 1 and a 3. Yeah, no, that was probably good in draft and standard when it was around, but no longer. Ooh, bottle gnomes! Bottle gnomes are great. They were referenced in the latest Commander, I think it was. Sorry, not the latest Commander, but the previous Commander, which is to say the Adventures from the Forgotten Realms Commander, because they had bottle golems. But bottle gnomes are great because you pay 3, you get a 1/3, which means you got a cheap blocker, and then all you need to do is sacrifice it and you gain 3 life. Bottle gnomes are great. And we have Rise of the Eldrazi Brimstone Mage, which has level up. I do not like level up. They did level up slightly better in Kaldheim with, I think it was Ascendant Spirit, which was basically you pay 1 and it comes into play as a 1/1. You pay something like 2 snow and it becomes something like a 2/2 with flying, and then you can then pay 3 snow and then you pay 4 snow. And each time it transforms and it's bigger. I like it. Level up, I don't like. For instance, for level up, it can you pay a standard cost, which is in this case 3 in a red, and you can only do it as a sorcery. So at each level up, you basically move the counter from the first one to the next one to the next one. And it gets progressively bigger or better. So it goes from being a 2/2 to being a 2/3 to being a 2/4. So my problem is that you pay 3 to put it down. Then next turn you pay 4, or you can pay it on the same turn. You can pay it as many times as you want, as long as it's sorcery speed. So you pay 4, and then it becomes level 1. In which case, Brimstone Mage deals 1. Has the ability to tap to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Okay. Then you pay the cost again, and it stays on that because it's level 1 to 2. And then you pay it again, and Brimstone Mage deals 3 gets the ability to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. And that is to say that it doesn't keep the first ability to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. The level 3 ability overwrites the level 1 to 2 ability. And I don't like it. Because I've played with it, the way I see it is it's always, you're pulling a whole bunch of mana into this one creature that you hope to get to level 3 before someone shoots its ass off, or before someone kills it, or before there's a board wipe, or before you just throw it under the bus. Like, you're really hoping that this thing sticks around, because you're going to be paying a lot. Well, I mean, I can tell you that you're going to be paying 12 to get it to level 3, and then once it hits level 3, you're not going to be paying 4 anymore. But it's the fact that it costs 3 to bring down, costs 12 to get it to level 3, means you're paying a total of 15 mana to get something that shoots a creature or player for 3? It's going to be dead by the time that rolls around. There is like maybe 1 or 2 okay level ups, but I don't like the level up. It just... no. Meandering Tower Shell. I like it because of its flavour, and other than that, it's not a very good card. Meandering Tower Shell is 3 and 2 green. It has Island Walk, which is great because you hardly ever see any walks anymore. Like, there used to be Mountain Walk, which means it can't be blocked if an opponent controls a mountain. You see a lot of forest walk. You see some forest walks, most recently in Chatterfang, the Squirrel General. Island walks typically you see for merfolk, but it's just nice to see other things with Island Walk. Planeswalk, there's only one creature that has Planeswalk, and that's a chicken. And if you don't believe me, look it up. What was it? Mountain Walk, Plains Walk. Oh, Swamp Walk was another one that was around for a little while. Again, most of the ones you see now are Island Walk and occasionally Forest Walk. All the other walks have been discontinued. But anyway, whenever Meandering Tower Shell attacks, you exile it. Then return it to the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking at the beginning of the declare attacker step on your next turn. So I really like it how it's a literal Meandering Tower Shell, because you attack with it, and then you exile it. And then next turn it comes back and attacks. Sort of like it takes its time. And it's a 5/9, so more often than not you're going to be using it just as a blocker. And our R&D is the Grand Tour. So, no, this has nothing to do with Top Gear. This is just the Grand Tour, which has a whole bunch of pictures. Well, let me just... of Febblethorpe. Like, all in different planes. So, you've got Febblethorpe at the City of Brass, the Hell Vault. I think that's supposed to be Armonket. I'm not 100% sure what that one is, but that looks like Innistrad. Looks like one of the land cards from Innistrad, and I don't know what the other one is. But Grand Tour costs 1 and a blue, and it's instant speed. Exile target permanent, then put it into its owner's hand. Okay? That player discards that card, then puts it on top of their library, then they put it onto the battlefield. Okay, so a lot of times I talk about cards or I mention cards that do nothing. This is one of those cards that does nothing, but at the same time it does something. So basically, someone attacks you with a card, you cast Grand Tour, you exile it, it goes into their hand, then they put it into their graveyard, then it goes back on top of their library, and then it goes onto the battlefield. I mean, it's a convoluted way of basically making sure that it doesn't attack again, and if there are any, and it also triggers any enter the battlefield effects, things like that. Or any dies effect, because dies is whenever a card is put from graveyard. No, that's from battlefield to graveyard. But I suppose Sir Gawain cares about it, because that's whenever a creature card is put into the discard into the graveyard. But again, the Grand Tour doesn't really do anything. It just enters pretty much all the different places and then nothing. It's a funny card for a funny set. So going through, Tybalt's Rager. It's a devil. When it dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. It gets plus for 2. It gets +2 +0 till end of turn. Yeah, no, that's it's from War of the Spark. Okay, yeah, no, that explains why it's so bleh. War of the Spark uncommons were pretty meh. I mean, overall as a set, it wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It definitely wasn't what they wanted it to be. Ooh, Temple of the False God. This is great in Commander. Particularly since it was pretty much designed for Commander, which is you tap it, you get 2 colorless as long as you control 5 or more lands. And that obviously includes itself. Problem that I've been encountering recently is there's really no reason to have Temple of the False Gods. Like, when Commander was still relatively young, Temple of the False God was really good because it helped you with the mana ramp. Nowadays, there's enough 2-color, or at least multi-mana producing lands, that Temple of the False God doesn't matter that much. Plus, I found more often than not, you tend to have it in your hand at the start of the game, or something will happen and you'll only have 3, including Temple of the False God, and it just means that instead of being able to cast things that cost 3, it means that you can only cast things that cost 2 because you can't tap it for anything. It just becomes a frustrating card, I've found. Manamorphose. Now, I said that I'd mention commons that are actually really good, or at least that I use frequently. Manamorphose is a common from Lorwyn that costs 1 and either a red or a green, and it adds 2 mana of any combination of colours to your mana pool, and you draw a card. It's what's known as a cantrip, which is basically you cast the card for like 1, and it does something small, and it draws you a card. Other cantrips are things like Gitaxian Probe. I mean, there's enough of the cantrips that they're labelled under cantrips. But Manamorphose is probably one of the better ones because it allows you to filter your mana. So, for example, if you only have red sources and you need a green source, you can tap 1 and a red and you can get 2 green. And it really helps, and it's used a lot in Modern, particularly for the draw card effect, but also because it helps fix your mana. So, Manamorphose is a great card. And speaking of the Grand Tour, we have Filthit the Lost. Now, as a commander, he is funny, but he's not particularly good. So, for 1 and a blue, he's a legendary creature Homunculus, and when Filthit the Lost enters the battlefield, draw a card. Great. If it entered from your library or was cast from your library, draw 2 cards instead. Not many cards do that, but great. When Filthit becomes a target of a spell, shuffle Filthit into its owner's library. It runs away. It's like Norin the Weary, but not. And the really interesting thing about Filthit is that it's one of those cards where it's fun and it does funny stuff and you can laugh about it and your opponents can laugh about it. But there's also enough supporting Filthit to make it actually a decent commander. So it's one of those weird ones where you can have a decent, funny, but laid back and decent commander. It's, again, sort of like Norin the Wary. And moving on, we have a Siege Elemental, which costs 4 and 2 red, and obviously its creature type is Elemental. It is Trample. Its other abilities are untapped creatures can't block, tapped creatures can't block, and it's a 6/6. So, comes into play. Nothing can block. Blocking is not an option. Basically, everything becomes unblockable. It's weird. But it's a test card, so that makes sense. Murder of Crows. For 5, 3 and 2 blue, whenever another creature dies, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. And it's 5 for a 4/4. That's decent. 5 for a 4/4 flyer. We've seen worse. Whenever another creature dies, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Draw or discard. Filtering. Great. So, overall, decent. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but it's good for most blue decks. Just not most modern decks. Rolling Thunder. Rolling Thunder deals X damage divided as you choose amongst any number of target creatures and or players. See, this is fine, because you're paying X and 2 red. It's a lot like, I think it's Shatter Skull Pass, where you pay X and 2 red, and it deals damage. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it. Does exactly what red does, which is shoot you in the face. Cauldron Dance. From Commander Set for 4, a black and a red. Cast Cauldron Dance only during combat. It's instant. So yes, cast it only during combat. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Cool. That creature gains haste. Nice. Return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. Awesome. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Great. That creature gains haste. Nice. Its controller sacrifices it at the beginning of the next end step. Oh, so it cycles them. That's awesome. Cool. That's actually not a bad card. There are a large number of cards that can make use of that. Jungle Hollow. Dolmen Gate. For 2, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. Cool. You have enough chump blockers. You don't get damage. That's okay. Huh. Sorry, just thinking. I could probably put that in my Lind deck, but no. Not a bad one. Basilisk Collar. I really like it. It was great. It's great for Voltron. Like, fantastic for Voltron. Most other decks, mainly it's a Voltron type. So, Basilisk Collar is 1. Its equip is 2. And equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. 2 abilities that you really like. It's great. And, okay. This card, or the test card, is called Soulmates. So you got a turtle and a hamster. I'm going to say it's a hamster. Some people may say chinchilla. I'm going to go with hamster. Cost 2 and a green. Enchantment Aura. Enchant 2 creatures. That's going to be really hard. Enchanted creatures each get +1/+1 and have hexproof. Awesome. When one of the enchanted creature dies, destroy the other. There is honestly nothing wrong with that card. I can see that being an actual card. But they'd probably say something like, when this card, enchant target creature, create a copy of this card and attach it to another target creature. And then, of course, as one of the tokens, you'd get just a copy of it. Or you'd get the... Or you'd use the copy tokens that are available. And other than that, enchanted creatures each get +1/+1, have hexproof. That's fine. And when enchanted creature dies, destroy the other. That's equally fine. That would actually be an okay card. Because one of the funny things is what you could do is you could equip it onto a token you have and put it onto your opponent's best creature, and then sacrifice the token, and then it kills the creature. Alternatively, what you could do is you could attach it to 2 of your creatures. There's a lot of things you can do. You could use it as removal. You could use it as protection. Honestly, I think the only reason why they kept it as R&D is either they couldn't fit it into a set, or because it says enchant 2 creatures, which is an easy fix. So, our uncommon is Concentrate, which is just draw 3 cards. There's nothing wrong with that. It's very blue. Stagger Shock. For 2 and a red, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player, and it has Rebound. So Rebound was you cast it, you resolve it, and then you exile it. And then, at the beginning of your next upkeep, you can then cast it. It then comes back, and you have an option of either casting it, or it just fizzles. And you do so without paying its mana cost, so... Rebound was actually kind of fun and good. But it's kind of good that it hasn't really shown up that much again, because it is pretty abusable. Anger is an incarnation of anger. It has haste, costs 3 and a red. It has haste, and as long as anger is in your graveyard and you control a mountain, creatures you control have haste. It's fine. It was part of the Incarnation set where you had things like anger, wonder, vitality. I think was the vigor. And it was just a set of cards that did things. They were just incarnations. It's supposed to be like the distillation of what the colours did. Soul Manipulation. It's okay. It's 3. I mean, I love blue-black, but this card it's okay. And choose one or both. You counter target creature spell, return creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And it's okay. Perilous Mirror. It's 2 for a 1/1, and when it dies, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Simple. Easy. And now we have Angelic Destiny. Now again, this could just be me. I don't think it's mythic worthy. Like, rare? Definitely a rare. But, okay, so it costs 2 and 2 green. Enchanter creature gets +4/+4 and has flying and first strike and is an angel in addition to its other types. When an enchanted creature dies, return Angelic Destiny to its owner's hand. Now, usually that last line would be what made it mythic. But honestly, you have cards like Rancor, and it's like, if I have Rancor, why does that line of text mean that it's mythic? Other than that, +4/+4 is kind of excessive, and it has flying and first strike and is an angel. Like, making it an angel doesn't really affect anything. There's very, very few cards which say non-angel. And some of the other cards that care about angels usually care about them when they're entering the battlefield. And because this is an enchantment, it means that you already have to have a creature on the battlefield to enchant. So it doesn't really trigger any enters the battlefield. I think the flying and first strike is probably what get it. But if it has flying, first strike, and lifelink, then yes. But ultimately, I don't like it as a mythic. It just sort of feels like it's trying way too hard to be that mythic. Tempt with Discovery. The Tempt cards were introduced in Commander and were great. Because they have the ability called Tempting Offer. Which is basically, you do something, and then everyone else has the option of doing it. And if they do it, you get a bonus for doing it. For them doing it. So, Tempting Offer for Tempt with Discovery is, search your library for a land card and put it onto the battlefield. Great. That's a land card, which basically means any of your non-basic lands will enter the battlefield untapped. Or you can basically search for non-basic lands, which is great. Each opponent may search his or her library for a land card and put it onto the battlefield. Okay, so they do the same thing. For each opponent who searches a library this way, search your library for a land card and put it onto the battlefield. So basically, you do it first, then everyone has the option of doing it. If they like it, then they can do it, and then for each player that did that, you get to do it again. It's what the Tempt series of cards did, and it did it really well. More often than not, though, you found that you were kind of lacking. Like, the Tempt cards worked really well, but they sort of put you and your opponents on the same level. And again, with most Magic games, you sort of want that asymmetry where you're ahead of your opponent. But Tempt with Discovery is one of those cards where it's really great. The only problem is that you need to weigh up whether or not when to use it, because you may desperately need lands, but you also know that getting your opponents to search for any land and putting onto the battlefield untapped could put them in a much better position than it puts you in, even if you do get 2 lands out of it. And the R&D card is Stack of Paperwork, which is just 1 white enchantment. When Stack of Paperwork enters the battlefield, draw a card. Now, the biggest kicker of Stack of Paperwork is now combat damage uses the stack. So combat damage assignment can be responded to before damage is dealt. You know, like it used to. So 1, this is a really great callback. 2, it's a funny card. And 3, oh boy, damage going on the stack leads to some not very fun interactions. It also, one of the reasons why they also removed damage from the stack was so that they could do other, or print other cards which didn't take a huge, basically so they could print cards that didn't take a huge advantage of combat damage being on the stack. At the same time, it also caused a lot of issues because new players were having difficulty comprehending the stack. So by simplifying the stack, which I want to say they did in 95 or something like that, I think it was around about Urza's, basically they changed the stack, and they changed the way that they basically changed phases. So you had the upkeep phase, which wrapped up untap, upkeep, draw. And that was all put under one phase. And then you had like the combat phase, the main phase, a whole bunch of others. So basically it became phases. And that was also when they got rid of damage being on the stack. So they basically went, all creatures deal damage simultaneously. Which works, and it doesn't work. I mean, the way it doesn't work is that it can be annoying, and particularly if you forget about certain abilities. But the upside is that the stack is now easier to manage. It's easier for everyone to understand, which means that more people can play the game because they understand how it works. So next up we have Annihilate. Destroy target non-black creature, can't be regenerated, draw a card. This isn't a cantrip. I mean, it can be classified as a cantrip because it says draw a card, but not everything that has draw a card is a cantrip. I mean, it's good and it draws you a card, it's just nothing to write home about. It's fine. I mean, usually the destroy target creatures are 3 drops, but that's fine. I mean, destroy target non-black creature is basically Doomblade, which is a 2-drop, which then makes you wonder where the other 3 is coming from, and that's for drawing a card, and you go, really? Campaign of Vengeance is 3 white and a black. Enchantment, whenever a creature you control attacks, defending player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Cool. That's okay. Ooh! We have a Planar Chaos card. I like the art. Oh, well, I like the borders and all that. I think it's kind of fun. But this one is Shrouded Lore for 1 black. Target opponent chooses a card in your graveyard. You may pay 1 black. If you do, repeat this process except that opponent can't choose a card already chosen for Shrouded Lore. Then put the last chosen card into your hand. So it's actually kind of a good one, because it's sort of like you pay 1 black and your opponent has to choose a creature in your graveyard. So what they'll do, obviously, is they'll pick the stupidest card or the worst card to go back into your hand. And then you can basically go, nope, pay 1 black, choose again, and you can't choose the card you've already chosen. So then they'll keep doing that, and then you keep cycling that until they choose a card that you want. It may end up being very cheap, particularly if there's only 1 card or 2 cards in your graveyard, or it might end up being very expensive. But it's one of those, it's a good card. Commander card. From Commander, Yuriko, the Tiger's Shadow. For a 3-drop, legendary creature, human ninja, Commander Ninjutsu. For 1 and a black, return an unblocked attacker you control to hand. Put this card onto the battlefield from your hand or from the command zone, tapped and attacking. So she can literally just jump in. It's great. It's what ninjutsu does, but ninjutsu is typically from hand. Commander ninjutsu means it's also from the command zone. Whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to that card's converted mana cost. Pretty good. My only problem is there aren't enough cards with ninjutsu. They've been printing more, which is good, and owing to the fact that we now have Shadowrun, we've got not Shadowrun coming in January, which is to say that's Kamigawa in the future, which is basically Shadowrun. We can expect a lot more ninjutsus, which means that Yuriko is going to be so much better. And our R&D card is Zyme, Mesmeric Lord, for 1, a blue, and 2 black. Legendary creature, Vampire Wizard. It is flying and death touch, as vampire wizards do. When Zim enters the battlefield, target opponent chooses an order for the cards in their hand, then reveals them one by one until you say stop. That player then discards the most recently revealed card. Okay. Not only is that confusing, it also doesn't really do anything, because you're forcing them to discard a card. I suppose it works great with blink effects, but you're just forcing them to discard a card before you've either seen the rest. It can work, but it sort of feels like an thing. Like something from one of the sets. I'm sure people out there can make it work, but it doesn't seem particularly good to me. Like, maybe if it had another ability, it would be a lot better. Ooh, Yavimaya Elder. Yes, it's a common, but as I mentioned before with Sakura Tribe Elder and Burnished Heart, Yavimaya Elder is another standard. Again, Sakura Tribe Elder and Yavimaya Elder are for green, but they do essentially what you want, which is when Yavimaya Elder dies, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. And for 2 and sacrificing Yavimaya, you draw a card. So, decent card. A Crow and Hoplite. I saw so many of these cards. I don't like them. Whenever a Crow and Hoplite attacks, it gets +X+0 till end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures you control. The dogs did it better, honestly. Which is to say, I think it's one of the white dogs from whichever set Ren and Seri was in. I think it was 2018, 2019. Did something similar, did it a lot better. And this is red and a white. I don't like it. Etched Oracle. I want to like it. I don't like Sunburst. So Sunburst is when this card enters the battlefield. This card enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each colour of mana spent to cast it. Which means when it comes into play, it gets a maximum, because it costs 4, of 4 +1/+1 counters on it, making it a 4/4 for 4. Provided you, of course, spent 4 different kinds of mana. 4 different colours of mana. Which is to say that colourless does not count as a colour for mana. It is the absence of colour. So that means any of the 4 of the 5 colours need to be spent in order to make it a 4/4. So then you can use its ability, which is you pay 1, remove 4 +1/+1 counters from Etched Oracle, target player draws 3 cards. Great. Huzzah. Want to like it? Could be good. It just isn't that good. Contagion Clasp. Pretty good. When it comes in, it costs 2 when it comes into play. Target creature gets a -1/-1 counter on it, which is good. And then for 4 and tapping, Proliferate. Also good. It's a nice little ramp. Mimic Vat. This is a card that sees some play, some not so much. For 3, you can imprint, which is whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat into its owner's graveyard. So basically, whenever a non-token creature dies, you can choose to exile it under Mimic Vat. Any other cards that were there go to their owner's graveyards. And for 3 and tap, create a token that's a copy of the card exiled with Mimic Vat. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So it basically gets you a copy until end of turn, which is great because you can cast it at any time because it's an artifact. And our test card is the Learned Learner, which is a Cephalid Wizard because we haven't had enough Cephalids. They're the... can't remember what set they came from. But this one costs 1 for a 0/3, and you have a maximum hand size. As long as you have a maximum hand size other than 7, Learned Learner has tap, draw a card. Okay, this is not a very good card. There are a number of cards which say maximum hand size is now... you have no maximum hand size, which is a maximum hand size other than 7. Some say maximum hand size is now 5. There are others that reduce it, but there aren't that many that it would warrant a card that specifically cares whether or not you have a maximum hand size other than 7. Like, very few. And it's just tap to draw a card, which is kind of powerful, but you need to have a maximum hand size other than 7, and that's just annoying. Righteous Cause for 3, 2 whites, enchantment. Whenever a creature attacks, you gain 1 life. Done. There is literally nothing else to that. It does what white does, and it does it well. Soul Warden. Again, I said that I'd mention decent cards. Soul Warden's part of the modern deck known as Soul Sisters, which contains Soul Warden, Soul Warden, Soul's Attendant, and Soul something else. But basically it's all about gaining a whole bunch of life. And Soul Warden is a decent card that not only... that seems like it would work best in Modern, and it's too cheap and too easy to die in Commander. That said, it's a great Commander card. I mean, not as the Commander, but like in Heliod, it just basically means that you keep putting +1/+1s on things. In pretty much any white deck in Commander, it's pretty decent. It's just that it's 1/1, but as long as you can find a way to buff it, which white definitely does have, it's pretty easy to keep around, and it's pretty powerful. Because it's whenever another creature, not just creature, enters your battlefield. So, next uncommon we have is a Monastery Swift Spear. For 1, it's a 1/2 with haste and prowess. The haste is what makes it uncommon. But other than that, that's a pretty fine card. And I ain't gonna complain. Draconic Disciple. For 1, a red and a green, you can tap to add 1 mana of any colour. Awesome! For 7, tap, sacrifice Draconic Disciple, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. Cool. It's a 2/2. It's fine. Hey! Artisan of Kozilek. 9-drop for a 10/9. And when you cast a spell, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's great! What makes it better? Annihilator 2. Heck yeah! Bloom Tender. Elf Druid. Tap. For each colour amongst permanents you control, add 1 mana of any of that colour to your mana pool. Basically produces mana for any card that has a colour that you own. Why does that matter? Well, because it's a 1/1 that costs 2, and it's a great mana dork. Also, you stick it in an elf deck and it just gets even better. And Reality Scramble. Now, I was looking at this card yesterday. Ooh, we've also got a miscut. Ooh, we got a miscut. So, I should probably... So, you probably can't see it. I'm trying to show it to you in the light, but you can see, if I push it back a bit more, you can sort of see where the printer or the sealer has sealed it on the actual card rather than where it's supposed to be, which is just below. But Reality Scramble is 2 and 2 red for a sorcery. Put target permanent you own on the bottom of your library. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card that shares a card type with that permanent. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So basically you get rid of something that you already have, and then you keep revealing. So for example, if you happen to have a zombie token, you would put target permanent you own on the bottom of your library. So the zombie token would go to the bottom of your library, but because it's a token, it can't. So that means it gets exiled. Reveal card, but you would still do the rest. So reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card that shares a card type, so zombie or creature, with that permanent. Put that card onto the battlefield. And you put the rest of the cards revealed in a random order on the bottom of your library. So basically, you get rid of your token, and you get another creature. It's actually pretty good. But I'm not 100% sure whether or not it deserves to go in any of my decks. Ooh, Celestine Cave Witch. For 3 and a black, it's a human warlock. When Celestine Cave Witch enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 black insect creature tokens. Cool. Whenever Celestine Cave Witch attacks, you may sacrifice an insect. If you do, curse defending player. Create a black Aura Curse enchantment token that's attached to that player. It has enchant play, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life. And it's a 2/3. That's actually not a bad card. I like it. Yeah, I actually do like it. I suppose the only problem is it's curse defending player, rather than you may sacrifice an insect if you do create an enchantment token that says, at the beginning of your upkeep you lose 1 life. I mean, that's... yeah. I kind of like it. And what would make life even better is if it was an actual legal card, I could stick it in my Lind deck and then find a way to try and propagate some black insect creature tokens, which I think you can do with the Scarab enchantment. Curse of Scarabs, which is whenever... Curse of Scarabs, which is whenever you put a 1/1... a -1/-1 token on another creature, produce a 1/1 black scarab. Could probably do that. Otherwise, it works with that insect commander. Or that insect planeswalker. That can also be a commander. Because of the way things are phrased. So, Aura of Silence, pretty standard. Artifact and enchantment spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast. Sacrifice Aura of Silence, destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's easy. It's simple. It's white. White is the big no. Red is shoot you in the face. Blue is I'll allow it. Street Wraith. For 3, 2 black, it is Swamp Walk. Cycling, which means discard this card to draw a card, is to pay 2 life. So, in other words, you discard this card, pay 2 life, and you draw a card. Cool. Probably not a good one for Commander, but if you really, really want to, cycle through cards, then sure. Savage Twister. One of the few red, I suppose. No, sorry, one of the few green board wipes. Savage Twister deals X damage to each creature, and it costs X in a red and green. Suspicious Bookcase. Defender, pay 3, tap, target creature can't be blocked this turn. So it's a card that basically is like Rogue's Passage. And Dragon Mask. Now, unfortunately, this is from Visions, which means because of the Visions icon, I cannot tell if it's a common, uncommon, or rare. Given its position, I can probably guess that it's either a rare or an uncommon. But Dragon Mask is it costs 3, you pay 3 and tap it. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 till end of turn. At end of turn, if that creature is in play, return it to its owner's hand. Okay. It's not that good, but okay. Feldar Sovereign. It costs 4 and 2 white for Vigilance Lifelink, which is great, especially since it's on a 4/6 body. Now, this card caused some issues when it first hit. And that was because at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. Now, obviously in a standard game, this is fairly difficult because you need to have a whole bunch of life gain, meanwhile your opponent's bashing you in the face. And the Vigilance and Lifelink really helped that. But when it came to Commander, it was all about cheating it out, because you start at 40 life. So what you do is you just have minimal life gain, or no one does anything for the first few turns, and then you have an artifact or something that cheats out a card, and you cheat out Feldar Sovereign at the end of your opponent's turn, or something like that, and then you win. So it was just a matter of it won games really easily. Nowadays it's probably a bit harder, but it's still there. And Maro's gone nuts. So there's a little bit of a pun. So first off, Maro is the name of a card, which is just a basic green card. But it's also the nickname given to Mark Rosewater, because it takes the first 2 letters of his first and surname, which is Mark and Rosewater, and it smashes them together. And even colloquially, he's known as Maro. So this is poking fun at that, because Maro's gone nuts. It costs 2 green as an enchantment, and says double any effect that doubles. And then in reminder text it says, it quadruples. So that means that any effect that doubles twice. But then, of course, it has a problem because... So you have something like Doubling Season. And Doubling Season is whenever any number of tokens or any number of counters get placed on, you instead place on twice that many, which doubles. You then play Maro's Gone Nuts, which means that Doubling Season then puts 4 times as much. Now, then you pair it with something fun. I want to say it's Primeval Bounty, or something like that, which also doubles. Which then means that you double, then quadruple, and then... I can't remember what it is for 8. I can get up to 7, which is septuple, but I want to say it's heptuple, which basically means 8 times. Except then what you can do, so then at 8. But then, of course, you can move things around, or you can choose what it doubles. So then you have Doubling Season, which doubles once, or it doubles it. Then you have Primeval Bounty, which then quadruples it. And then you have Maro's Gone Nuts, which then 16 times it. But it says double any... so double any effects it doubles. So it doubles, which then takes double into quadruple. No, it 8s. Anyway, that's the R&D card. Math isn't my strong point. Why am I playing a game that revolves around math? God only knows. I like the art. I'm sorry, did I chronostatistata? We have Opportunity, which is for 4 and 2 blue. Target player draws 4 cards. Cool. It's like the other one that draws 3, only it draws 1 more. Told you I could do math. Stormblood Berserker, with 1 and a red with Bloodthirst. That's something I haven't seen in a while. So if an opponent was dealt damage this turn, this creature enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. So this is similar to actually a few of the red cards that came out in Midnight Hunt, which is because most of the vampires cared about dealing damage. Oh, should I say, after dealing damage, which is basically Bloodthirst, but not quite, because usually they'd have other things. But Bloodthirst is basically, if an opponent's been dealt damage, you then play this card and it gets +1/+1 counters on it, equal to the Bloodthirst value. And it also has Menace. So, there you go. Imperious Perfect. Decent elf card. Just been reprinted a bit too much at this point, but I'm glad it's out there because elf tribal commanders and elf tribal modern decks are becoming more and more popular. So making the key cards cheaper is pretty good. 2 and a green, other elf creatures you control get +1/+1, and for green and tapping, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. It's a nice card. Crumbling Necropolis. So, like the Frontier Bivouac we saw before, this is one of those ones that enters play tapped and produces 3 different colours. Elixir of Immortality, which is a nice one. It's basically 1, you pay 2, you tap it, and you gain 5 life, and then you shuffle it back into your library. I played it at it says M11, so that means I played it at the M11 pre-release, and it really annoyed my opponent because it kept coming out. I kept paying 1, 3, shuffle it back in, I gain 5 life, I'll take whatever damage you throw at me. Next we have Talon Sky Summoner, which is 2 and 2 blue. Merfolk Wizard, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. People use it as a commander. That's fine. It's an okay commander. I got nothing against it. It does what it does. Metagamer! 2 white. Creature Human Advisor. Cards in the winning deck of the latest Mythic Championship cost 1 more to cast. And it's a 2/2. So, Metagamer is very much a metagamer. He's doing the things that need to be done. And I can't show you, but in the art it's got a guy who's showing a card, which is metagamer, which is obviously him showing a card, which is metagamer, which is... So it's that whole infinite thing going on. It's not a bad card. I mean, it's very meta, and it's probably one of the few times other than an unset that you can get away with something like that. But ultimately, it doesn't really achieve anything. It's just a nice card, I suppose. I mean, it has something that looks vaguely like Tom Scar on it, but other than that. Corpsejack Menace. I like this card. It was fun. Mainly because I was running a Skullbriar deck at the time, but other than that, it's okay. It's 2 black-green. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. It's not bad. It does what Golgari loves, and that's pretty much it. Next up we have Mistform Shrieker, which is one of the few mist forms, because there was a whole section of mist forms, and I think that is Torment. But flying, you pay 1, Mistform Shrieker's type becomes a creature type of your choice until end of turn. And a lot of the Mistforms were all about having all creature types. So that was sort of like the Changelings before Changelings. And it also has Morph for 3 and 2 blue. And it's a 3/3. So, okay. Evra, the Halcyon Witness. It's an avatar, so another avatar. It is lifelink. It is 4, exchange your life title with Evra Halcyon Witness's power, and it's a 4/4. It's not bad. It's sort of like if you're losing, then you basically have 4 life. But more often than not, what you'd want to do is put a whole bunch of +1/+1s on it, and then you just keep exchanging the life. And our test card is the High Troller. It's a goblin dressed a troll dressed as Santa. So for 3 and a red, you get a Troll Shaman with all targeted spells and abilities cost 2 less and have their targets chosen randomly. So it really is trolling, especially since it's a 4/1, which means it can die pretty quickly as long as it's one of the randomly chosen ones. So it's one of those cards where it sort of feels like it should be in an unset, but it clearly doesn't have any synergy or any cohesion to its ability, so they couldn't stick it in an unset. Anyway, we have a Trial of Ambition, which is an enchantment. For 1 and a black, when Trial of Ambition enters the battlefield, target opponent sacrifices a creature. When a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, return Trial of Ambition to its owner's hand. And this was part of the whole Amonkhet, because they had cartouches, which were a particular, artifact that come into play. I want to say it was an enchantment, but comes into play, they do things. So basically what would happen is you would play a trial, play a cartouche, trial bounces back, and then you could play it again. Obviously it didn't quite work and doesn't work 100% looking back, but it was a nice attempt. Arc Trail. Arc Trail deals 2 damage to target creature or player and 1 damage to another target creature or player. This is a good way of dividing damage. Like, without saying divide 1 or divide 2 damage amongst 1 or 2 creatures. It's just 2, then 1. Done. And it costs 2, so all the better. No fuss, no muss. And the crowd goes wild. For X and a green, it's a sorcery with assist, which means, because this is part of Battle Bond set, which was aimed at two-headed giant, which I haven't played in years. Thank you very much, Mr. What's Going Around the World at the moment. But assist is basically another player can choose to pay part of the cost. So another player can pay up to X of this spell's cost. You choose the value of X. It has support X, which is put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures. And each creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gains trample until end of turn. So, pretty decent. Weapons Trainer, not that good. Other creatures you control get +1/+0 as long as you control an equipment. The dwarves in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms do it so much better. Blasted Landscape, it adds colourless, or you can cycle it for 2. So you pay 2 and discard it, and you draw a card. Chromatic Star, cost 1. Cost 1 tap, and you sacrifice Chromatic Star to add 1 colour of any and 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool. When it's put in the graveyard, you draw a card. So, huzzah! And unfortunately, it's a common. Next up, we have Mind Shatter. For X and 2 black, target player discards X cards at random. It's sorcery, that's all it does. So now we have a Throat Wolf, as opposed to go for the throat. Now this is 1 and 2 red. To summon a wolf, you may cast Throat Wolf during an opponent's combat phase. Okay, so it has Pseudo Flash. First is Strike. This creature deals combat damage to creatures before creatures with first strike. So this is sort of like a play on what they did in one of the unset, which is last strike, which means that after regular combat damage is dealt, it then does combat damage. So we have first, then regular combat, and then last strike. After each opponent's first combat phase of each turn, there is an additional combat phase. Only Throat Wolf can attack during that combat phase. Oh, wow. Okay. So that's a card. Moving on, we have Cast Out, which is just the standard white exile. Flash, when Cast Out enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield. Yay. It is cycling, which is the main reason why it's probably so expensive. Oop, Mighty Shadow goes in the rares. Sphinx's Tutelage. This actually was pretty popular for a little while. So, it's an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into a graveyard. If they're both non-land cards that share a colour, repeat this process. So it's a good way of getting mill. And for 5 and a blue, draw a card, then discard a card, which means that Sphinx's Tutelage obviously pops off. You pair that with things like Teferi's Tutelage and Teferi's Ageless Insight, and you get some pretty decent mill. And that's just mono blue. So, I'm always a big fan of mill. A lot of the cards seem to be avoiding mill though. It's annoying. Goblin Assault. If I recall, this is actually used in Modern a fair bit. Or at least mainly for Goblin decks. For 2 and a red, it's an enchantment which is at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 red Goblin creature token with haste. Goblin creatures attack each turn if able. This is great for a Goblin commander like Krenko or Madrox or something. It's fine. Goblins tend to want to attack each turn because they tend to like dying. But that's a Goblin problem. Spike Shot Goblin. Costs 2 and a red for 1, and to tap, Spike Shot Goblin deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. Not quite a Goblin, but definitely useful. Bestial Menace is, for 5 you put a 1/1 green snake, a 2/2 green wolf, and a 3/3 green elephant. It's what it does, and it doesn't do any more. Cedraxis Spectre. With a blue, black, and a red. Flying, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. But then it's got Unearth, which is from Grixis. So Unearth is you pay 1 and a black, or because it's an Unearth cost, it is 1 and a black, but you pay the Unearth cost. Return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step, or if it would leave the battlefield, and you can Unearth only as a sorcery. Foundry Inspector. Artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. This is great for Modern, because it's 3, and it basically means all your artifacts cost 1 less, which means that a lot of the artifacts you're going to be casting are free because you're paying a lot of 1 or 2 cost artifacts. Ancient Den is pretty much an artifact land, one of the only ones. Coglin's Command. For 1, a red and a black, you choose 2 to either return target creature card from your graveyard to hand, discard a card, target player discards a card, destroy target artifact, or deal 2 damage to target creature or player. It's pretty good. And next up we have Vazril the Complete, and it's spelt like Phyrexian. So it's 3 and 3 green for legendary artifact creature Phyrexian. And it has mega legendary. Your deck can only have 1 copy of this card, so it doesn't affect, commander. But it has Vigilance and Trample, is a 7/7, which is decent, and Vazril has the activated abilities of all other permanents on the battlefield. Okay, I can see why that's a test card. That's clearly something that they might want to do in the future, but having the activated abilities of all other permanents on the battlefield means that you can have some pretty bollocks abilities. So next we have Crib Swap, which is a 2/1 changeling with exile target creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with changeling. Changeling's nice. It's mainly good for cards that care about tribal, like Slivers. Other than that, most other decks are, Dismantling Blow for 2 and a white. As a kicker, you can play 2 and a blue, which means that its color identity is both blue and white, putting it in with the Innistrad Spirits. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. If the spell was kicked, draw 2 cards. So, that's actually not bad, even though it came from Modern Horizons 1. It's not bad. Ravenous Chupacabra. I really like this card, because it's 2 black, it's a 2/2, but when it comes into play, you destroy target creature and opponent controls. Simple, easy, you get a creature, your opponent loses a creature. It should still be available in Standard, because I believe that they reprinted it. I want to say they did. If not, it's great for Commander. Probably on the expensive side for Modern, but it's great. Because removal is always good. Rivals Duel. For 3 and a red, choose 2 target creatures that share no creature types. Those creatures fight each other. Cool. Fighting's always good. They don't have to share creature types, which is hardly a thing that happens, but it might hinder you, or it might help. Bloodbraid Elf. 2 red and green. It has haste for a 3/2, which is decent, but it also has Cascade, which means when you cast it, so that's before it enters the battlefield or anything, you cast it, you then exile cards from the top of your deck until you find a non-land card that costs less. So that means it could cost 1, or it could cost 3, or it could just cost 2. And then you cast that card without paying its cost. Which means that then if that card has Cascade, then you keep doing it. And that's why Cascade is kind of scary. But it's also really good, because then what happens is all the cards that you cascaded, you then shuffle and put it in a random order on the bottom of your deck. Mask of Memory, 2-drop, equip 1. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw 2 cards. If you do, discard a card. So cool, you get a card out of it. Ooh, next up we have a commander that I used to go up against, because one of my old commander buddies used to play this card a lot, and it's Sakashima the Imposter. So as Sakashima the Imposter comes into play, you may choose a creature in play. If you do, it becomes a copy of that creature, except its name is still Sakashima the Imposter. It's still legendary, and it gains 2 and 2 blue. Return Sakashima the Imposter to its owner's hand at end of turn, which basically means that you can get a whole bunch of really good stuff out of it, and you get bonuses, and Sakashima can become pretty much any color. It's kind of scary and can be very annoying, particularly since this guy was famous for having a whole bunch of counters in his hand. Like that would be his deck. Grasp of Fate is 1 and 2 white for an enchantment. When Grasp of Fate enters the battlefield, for each opponent, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls until Grasp of Fate leaves the battlefield. Basically, it's an exile card. It's a rare, that's fine. It's a white exile. Pfft. Ooh, Spellmorph Raise Dead. For 1 black, at instant speed, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. It is Spellmorph. You may cast this card face down as a 2/2 creature for 3, cast at any time for its Spellmorph cost. So basically, morph cards typically are creatures. You pay 3, and you put them face down and they're 2/2 creatures, and then what happens is you pay their morph cost or their megamorph cost, and they flip over, and then usually they'll have a trigger for when this card morphs. What they've done here is they're clearly trying to try it with cards that aren't just creatures, so like instants and sorceries. I mean, it works. It's just a bit... I mean, again, it can work. We have a Guard Gamazoa, which has Defender and Flying, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to Guard Gamazoa, which is great for a 3-drop for a 1/3. And it has Flying. Prevent damage is always fun, particularly on defenders. Next we have Yargle. Yargle, Glutton of Urbog, which is just a 4 and a black 9/3. Done. He proved to be very popular. Noxious Dragon is next for 4 and 2 black. Flying, when Noxious Dragon dies, you may destroy target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less for a 4/4. It does what it needs to. No fuss, no muss. It is flying because it's a dragon, so it's good. Mark of Mutiny, 2 and a red. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 on it and untap it. That creature gains haste till end of turn. So basically, it's like Traitorous Instinct. You steal a creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then you swing, and then you find a way to kill it because it's got a +1/+1 counter on it. But I suppose it's a way of making sure that the person who had their creature stolen at least gets a benefit out of it. Underworld Coinsmith, for a white and a black, it has Constellation. Whenever Underworld Coinsmith or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. For white and a black, you pay 1 life, each opponent loses 1 life. So live by the coin, die by the coin. Ooh, Aura Shards. So whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. That's great for an enchantment deck, because it basically means that you have a way of destroying stuff. Aura Shards is actually pretty good. The Djinn of Wishes. This one, oh wow, okay, so this one I'm pretty sure is the card that named all the wish cards. And what are wish cards? You'll see. So for 3 and 2 blue, you get a flying Djinn of Wishes enters the battlefield with 3 wish counters on it. For 2 and 2 blue, remove a wish counter from Djinn of Wishes, reveal the top card of your library. You may play that card without paying its mana cost. If you don't, exile it. So that isn't quite what wish cards are. Wish cards are typically cards that either let you search your library for a card and put it into your hand for each counter that you spend, or usually they let you get a card from outside the game and put them in. Wish cards are pretty... they're usually sought after, but it usually depends on what kind of deck you're running, depending on whether or not you're going to be running a wish card. So next up, we have a Domesticated Mammoth, which is a snow creature, which we haven't seen in a while. Mammoth. When Domesticated Mammoth enters the battlefield... Domesticated Mammoth enters the battlefield with a token copy of Pacifism attached to it. It's a 2-drop 5/4. So clearly they're trying to find a way of making bigger creatures cheaper. I can see it. Then you just destroy all enchantments and Bob's your uncle. Seraph of the Suns, with flying indestructible, and it's a 4/4. For 8. Sorry, for 7. Okay. I mean, I'm not... It's a card. Tectonic Rift. This was a card I used to see a lot of in Commander. So destroy target land, creatures without flying can't block this turn. Targeted land removal, which is always fun. I'm saying that sarcastically. But it's also creatures without flying can't block this turn, so basically it allows you to swing. Seek the Horizon. I liked this card. Search your library for up to 3 basic land cards, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle them into your library. And it was for 4. I liked this before they had the migration card from Ikoria, which is the same cost. Search your library for 2 and you put them into the battlefield. Much better. Sprouting Thrinax. When Sprouting Thrinax dies, create 3 1/1 green sapling creature tokens. Good for saplings, not many other things care. Mindstone. Used to be a staple of Commander. That was until Arcane Signet was released. But it's still a pretty good card for Commander because it's a mana rock in that case, in which case it produces mana, but also later on in the game you can pay 1 to tap and sacrifice it to draw a card, which always helps. Ooh, an old card. Avalanche Riders. Okay, I get it, because they're riding the avalanche. Summon Nomads. Echo. During your next upkeep after this permanent comes under your control, pay its casting cost or sacrifice it. I'm not a big fan of Echo because it usually meant that you pay its initial cost, which in this case is 3 in a red, and then at your next upkeep you have to pay it again to keep it around. I mean, you only have to pay it again once, but you still have to pay it again, which is super annoying. But usually the offset was that they were decent cards, but a lot of the abilities, looking back now, are they definitely aren't up to snuff. But this one is Avalanche Riders is unaffected by Summoning Sickness, so it has haste. And when Avalanche Riders comes into play, destroy target land. And that's probably the reason for the Echo, because it comes into play, you destroy target land, you swing with it, and then you don't pay its Echo, in which case it dies. It's mainly the land destruction, I think, that made it so expensive. Whelming Wave, which is very whelming. So for 2 and a blue, you return all creatures to their owner's hands, except for any krakens, leviathans, octopi, and serpents. I mean, octopuses is also acceptable, but still octopi. It bounces, does what it needs to. Seasoned Weaponsmith. So for 2 and a red, it's a bird warrior, which has tasty. So this creature can be attacked directly, so usually you're attacking a player and a player then designates blockers, or you can attack a planeswalker. But in this instance, players can get creatures to swing at Seasoned Weaponsmith. If it is attacked, it can't block creatures that didn't attack it. And it has 5 and 2. So in other words, what that means is your opponents can choose to swing at either you or Seasoned Weaponsmith. And if they attack Seasoned Weaponsmith, Seasoned Weaponsmith can't block those creatures. Can't block creatures that didn't attack it. So it can only block the creatures that are swinging directly at it. I mean, okay, but sure. I mean, it's a nice little card. It's fine. Blessed Spirits. For 2 and a white, you get a flying, and whenever you cast an enchantment spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Blessed Spirits. And it starts off its life as a 2/2, or its unlife as a 2/2 spirit. I like it. I'd stick it in a Spirits deck if I could be bothered making a Spirits deck. Dragon's Eye Servants. It is Morph, so reveal a blue card from your hand to basically flip it over to its unmorphed side, which is the side you're looking at now. When Dragon's Eye Servants is turned face up, look at target opponent's hand. It's fine, but it's a 0/6, which is mainly for defending. And it looks like we're starting to wrap up because this is the second last pack. We have Unlicensed Disintegration. For 1, a black and a red, you can destroy target creature. If you control an artifact, it deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. Huzzah. Not owner, controller. Big difference. Next up we have Soothsaying, which is an enchantment for 5, or 3 and 2 blue. Shuffle your library. And for X, look at the top X cards of your library and put them back in any order. So it sort of lets you set up. It's probably a card that won't see any real play anymore, but who knows. Mycolith. So for 3 and 2 green, it's a fungus creature with Devour 2. Now Devour was whenever you cast this card, you can, as part of the cost, you can sacrifice any number of creatures. When it comes into play, for each creature sacrificed, you put that number of +1/+1 counters on it. And being a 4/4, it means that it can be really big. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token for each +1/+1 counter on Mycolith. Now, there is a green-red dragon with Devour that I once played against, and that deck was really fun because what would happen is the entire deck was about devouring. So what would happen is that he would devour a couple of cards to play one card, which would then pump out a number of tokens, and then he'd keep pumping out tokens like Mycolith does, which then assist in devouring more. So you would keep devouring all the tokens in order to get more out of it. So for example, what you could do is you could cast a Mycolith for, let's just say it's standard cost. Next turn, you would then do a Mycolith. You'd then cast a Mycolith, sacrificing the first Mycolith. Yep. And Mycolith has Devour 2, which means it enters play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So then it would be a 6/6, which already is pretty scary. And then each turn it would pump out, because there were 2 counters on it, pump out 2. So at the beginning of your next upkeep, you'd 2, you then devour again, and this time you'd put 6 counters on it. So it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's really... It can be kind of scary. Oh, Loopy Lobster for 2 and a blue. It's a lobster creature. I don't think we have any lobster creatures. It's 4-faced, so whenever this becomes tapped, move it to the next stage, or if it's stage 1, or stage 1 if it's at stage 4. So at stage 1, it's a 1/4. So whenever you tap it, it then becomes a 4/1 with Evolve. Then, whenever you tap it again, at stage 3 it becomes a 2/4 with blue. Loopy Lobster gets +1/-1 until end of turn. Then you tap it again. At stage 4 it gets Vigilance, and you can tap it to draw 2 cards, which obviously then means that it loops back. It's actually not a bad card, and the idea of tapping to move it to the next stage is kind of funky. But I can see why it's a test card. I don't think that would do very well. And finally, for our last pack, we have a Celestial Crusader, which is 2 and 2 white for flash. Split second, which means that it basically can't be responded to. It is flying, and other creatures get +1/+1. So this would be a cornerstone of a spirit deck. Other than that, it's pretty good in any white deck. Feldar Guardian. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile another target permanent you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So basically Flash. Flicker. And Flicker's always been fairly decent, because you flicker your stuff and whatever was on it drops off, or whatever it was being targeted by no longer applies. Sultai Charm. So for a blue, green, or black. Choose one. Destroy target non-land. Destroy target mono-colored creature. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card. It's not bad. It was sort of what Salte does, but oh well. Arcane Sanctum. Again, that's one of the 3 colours. The Eater of Days. I do not like this card. I think it's a very bad card. It was probably good when it came out in Mirrodin, which is what that icon is, but I do not like it. It costs 4 for a 9/8, which is fine. Well, I mean, it's really cheap, so heck yeah. With Flying and Trample, heck yeah. But I feel like the downside is too much at this point, because it's when Eater of Days comes into play, you skip your next 2 turns. Now, if it was you skip your next turn, then that's fine, because it means you're essentially paying 4 for a 9/8, or if you want, you can think of it as almost paying 8 for a 9/8 with Flying and Trample. But the next 2 turns feels heavy. I mean, if this had an Echo, it would also make sense. Basically, if there was almost anything else other than losing 2 turns. Because losing 1 turn is pretty dramatic. Losing 2 turns can be devastating. And holy crap, we have a really hard card. We have a really expensive card. It's a card that's hard to find, and it's Teferi's Protection. So this card was only released in a Commander deck, and only recently has been reprinted as an archive card in Strixhaven. It was also reprinted for a Secret Lair, but Secret Lairs I'm not really counting because they're for the premium collectors. But Teferi's Protection is good because it costs 2 and a white, so it's cheap, for an instant speed. Until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you have protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out. Exile Teferi's Protection. So basically, it means that you get put in a bubble until your next turn, where no one can attack you, no one can target you, no one can do anything with you, and with you as a player, which basically means you have hexproof, and anything that you control can't be targeted, can't be attacked, nothing can happen to them. You're basically put in a bubble. In Commander, this is amazing, because it basically means that if someone tries to attack you, you Teferi's Protection, they can't do anything. I mean, they could respond to Teferi's Protection, but basically what happens is you get put in this bubble until your next turn where everyone can't interact with you. It's a really good card. And the last one we have is Tiger Stadium. It's a land, okay. Tiger Stadium enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a white, blue, or black permanent. Okay. I don't know why this was a test card. It's not bad. It doesn't really do anything. This would probably be a rare in most other sets, but I don't know why that's a test card. But anyway, here is our stack of test cards. That's it for the box, so no more. We have a decent amount of amusing, pointless, and strange cards. Some of which seem like they should be cards, others which seem like they could just do it with a little bit of fixing to be real cards, others which seem to be really, really pointless and bad. But then again, that's the same as with every set. As for the rares, we got a mishmash, not too bad, but ultimately not a bad box. But then again, we didn't know what was going to happen with our mystery booster, because it was a mystery. Thank you again for joining me, and now we leave.